Welcome everyone. My name is Scott Williams. I'm the Membership Director at the League of American Bicyclists. And this is our May Club Leadership webinar, Club Leadership 101. I'm joined tonight by Paul Rubin, who's the president of the Memphis Hightailers Bicycle Club, and he will be giving his presentation on how he and his fellow hightailers revitalize that club. First of all, I am going to show you some resources that I've added to our website recently in order that to support resources for club leaders, I guess is probably the best way to put it. It'll be a kind of a quick tour of what we have available on the website. I am going to show you my screen. I hope you see it by now. Looks like you can see it. I hope everybody's seeing it. So from the bikeleague.org homepage, we have the resources for clubs and club leaders under the club/group corner here under members. If you click through to that, things that I can show you in terms of supporting you as a club leader and support new and growing clubs, and all clubs really. The club leadership trainings like this one are all archived under this page and this menu to the right, Club Leadership Training. All the recordings from previous presentations are here. This presentation will be archived there tomorrow. And I think what we'll do tonight, what Paul will cover to a large degree, skips over a lot of these topics and talks about some of the basics and fundamental issues. But we've covered a lot of these topics in depth before, and you can go and see the presentations, watch and listen, or just see the slideshows that were put together. More recently, I think since the last time we had a webinar, I've added a page of club leadership resources, which is right here. And here I've gathered some of the sample documents that have come up as we've done the presentations and a few other that have been submitted. Paul gave me a couple in advance of his presentation tonight, including the bylaws of the Memphis Hightailers Bicycle Club. And if you scroll down on this page, there's a lot of other sample documents. I'm still collecting these. I would love to get any documents that you have and want to show off that you think would help support other clubs so they don't have to reinvent the wheel or reinvent standard handouts every time they have a new need. This is especially helpful as new clubs come online. A couple of more things I've added. There's now a club leadership email list that I'm running as a Google group. You can sign up for that, and we have email discussions so the issues that are troubling you and troubling your club can be covered and discussed with other club leaders. We also just recently did club leadership training in person in Memphis, hosted by Paul Rubin and the Hightailers. The attendees that came to that, I think, got a lot out of it from what I heard. I did not make it to that. We may do in-person club leadership trainings again in the fall. We try to avoid riding season as much as possible. So those are a few of the resources. One of the things that I just added today, I've done a bit of research on incorporation and nonprofit status for bike clubs and put together a document which you find here on this Club Leadership Resources page and also on the Create a Club page, which has a link to this, as well as how to start a bicycle club or advocacy organization document, which doesn't go into anywhere near the same level of depth in terms of outlining the various options that are available to bike clubs. And I've put together a presentation of some of the key points that we'll look at now, a quick slideshow here, on the basics of incorporation and nonprofit status for bike clubs. You'll want to, if you're pursuing these steps, work with a real attorney and real financial professionals in putting this together. With any luck, you've got those kind of people on your board or involved with your club, but you can also hire people to work with you on these issues. And I've put together the resources here, the slideshow and the document itself, just as a way for you to get your head around some of the questions that are involved and begin to think about the decisions before you engage with a lawyer, with a law firm, anybody helping you get incorporated. So there are two separate issues in terms of incorporating and getting nonprofit status, tax-exempt status for your organization. The first issue is incorporation, which is something that is granted by state government. You can incorporate as a nonprofit corporation. one of the key reasons that you would consider doing that is it limits individual liability for club debts and obligations, and that could include any sort of settlements that arose. It limits individual exposure to all sorts of club debts. And it is required in order to, well, this is a little bit overstated, I found out. It is useful in order to obtain an IRS nonprofit designation. It doesn't seem that it's absolutely required, but it makes it a lot easier to get a tax-exempt designation from the IRS. So the basics of incorporation, again, this is something that is granted and established at the state level. This is choosing a unique name that's not in use by another corporation in your state, creating bylaws for the organization, naming a board of directors and having a meeting for that body, and drawing up articles of incorporation. And once you're incorporated in the state, you're then required to pay federal, state, and local income taxes as applicable until you've received IRS tax-exempt designation. I think I might have used the terms a little bit sloppily in this. What the IRS gives in terms of designation is indeed exemption, a tax exemption, which is then usually honored by the state government as well. So usually following on from state incorporation, you apply with the IRS for a designation under the IRS code for tax exemption. There are a couple of different codes or different sections of the tax code that bike organizations typically fall under. So the main benefit is exemption from federal income tax and typically state and local taxes as well, although that's all governed at the state level and will vary from state to state. So all organizations with tax-exempt status must now file a Form 990 every year. This is a recent change from a few years ago, and is, I think, not universally known by organizations. If you have a tax-exempt status and you haven't been filing a Form 990, you need to look into doing so immediately. There are 3 versions of the Form 990. The 990N, which is for the smallest organizations, I believe, up to $50,000 in income a year. The 990EZ, which covers another range of organizations, it would almost certainly cover almost all the bike clubs in the U.S., and then the full 990 would apply to the largest organizations. Some income that is not directly tied to your nonprofit purpose may still be taxable. And if you look at the document that's available on our website, the expanded version of this, you will see the IRS publications that apply to that. There's some other benefits that can come with your IRS designation. Sales tax exemption for purchases made for the club, preferential mailing rates, tax deductibility of expenses, and in the case of one special tax-exempt designation, tax deductibility of donations for donors. And we will cover that on the next slide. So there are 3 sections of the tax code that you hear talk about: 501c3, 501c4, C7. Those are all sections of the tax code that pertain to different types of nonprofit organizations. The one that you hear about most often is the 501c3. These are the charitable organizations, including the League of American Bicyclists. And in some ways, particularly in terms of fundraising, it's a very desirable tax status, but it does come with some limitations and can be the most difficult designation to obtain. There are 2 other sections that typically apply to bike clubs when we survey our memberships. Those that have a tax-exempt designation from the IRS list one of these 3. If it's not 501c3, it's 501c4, which covers civic leagues and social welfare organizations, which can indeed apply to bicycling organizations, or 501c7, which is social and recreation clubs, which seems to be the most obvious one for bike clubs, but is not necessarily so for reasons that we'll point out in just a moment. So in terms of the 501c3 charitable organization, again, this is the one you hear about the most, people that are soliciting money from you over the internet, over the by direct mail are typically all 501c3 organizations. They're the ones that give you, as a donor, a tax deduction for donations, and in some cases, a portion of dues can be tax deductible, depending on what the dues are paying for. One of the things that's most beneficial about a 501c3 status for bike clubs is that corporate sponsorships, foundation grants, even if you're not doing fundraising from individuals, this is often required to get corporate money for rides and special events. In order to qualify for a 501c3 status, there's a short list of charitable purposes which make you eligible. Of these, the ones that are most likely to apply to bicycling organizations, I think most frequently used is educational. If you can claim that your activities are primarily, or indeed the word they use is exclusively, although that's applied a little loosely as it turns out, educational, you can obtain the 501c3 status. If you're working primarily with youth and encouraging the growth of the sport, that also qualifies you, and mixing and matching these purposes works as well. And if you're sponsoring or participating or preparing participants for national or international competition, is another charitable purpose that could be used to justify a 501c3 status. There is a filing fee to try to obtain the 501c3 status, whereas other nonprofit statuses, there's not a filing fee, based on what I found out. And the requirements are fairly stringent to prove that you're worthy of, that your work justifies the 501c3 charitable status. And there certainly are bike clubs that obtain and maintain the 501c3 status because of the nature of their activities. But certainly not all bike clubs would find it useful to work within these constraints that come with the 501c3 status, 501c3. So the other designations that apply, the social and recreation clubs, again, seems like the most obvious section that would apply to bicycling organizations, because it does, most would describe themselves as recreational clubs. The one thing that can be a problem is there is a 35% limit on income from non-members. And I had one question on email on the Google Groups email list about what is meant by income. I believe it is gross income, but I will confirm that and answer that on the list tomorrow. I want to see if my tax specialist, Ron Pewitt, is on the line. He does not seem to be with us right now, but he may be joining us by the end of the webinar and could answer more detailed questions then. Once I get through this, I probably will hold most of the questions until after Paul's presentation and take all the questions as a group. The other option then, if 501c7, you may not qualify if you have a big paid ride or a paid event and you may exceed the 35% limit on income from non-members. That's what can trip up a lot of bike clubs if they have those kinds of activities. The other is a 501c4, which is civic leagues and social welfare organizations. This is a section of the tax code where a lot of political organizations reside, because under 501c3 there's a small limit on the amount of effort and funding that can go into political activities. So more political organizations are almost always C4 organizations, but it can also apply to cycling organizations. Income and expenditure are more flexible, especially in terms of if you have a large paid ride. And it seems I haven't learned enough about how states treat the various organizations, because again it varies by state. 501c4s may be treated more favorably than C7s in terms of state sales tax exemption. Although again this varies state to state. Apparently California offers no sales tax exemption even for 501c3s. So it does bear investigating what the rules are and how things work where you are based. And just in terms of if you don't obtain a 501c3 status, there are a couple of options, and there may be more that perhaps we'll get into in discussions, in how to work around some of the difficulties presented in terms of not being able to accept tax-deductible donations and the challenges in terms of working with corporate sponsors. One of these is just partnering with another organization that is a 501c3 for rides or other big events, and then corporations might be more favorably disposed to offer sponsorships if it can be tax deductible. Other donations might then run through the other organization. You want to check and make sure that's all done above board in terms of the income and the disbursements on those sponsorships. But that is one way that I know that bike clubs are able to engage corporate donors, for instance, to sponsor events and still give those corporate donors the benefits that they're looking for. One thing that a lot of organizations, and a lot of larger organizations, particularly some of the political 501c4s, but also some larger ethical advocacy organizations, for instance, I think Cascade in Washington State is setting up a separate C3 organization for charitable activities. Often those organizations are listed as, they'll have names like foundation or education fund at the end of the name to distinguish them from the larger organization, which does not have a 501c3 tax status. And there is an additional burden in terms of bookkeeping and reporting, making sure that all the money is kept straight and separated between the C3 wing and the other organization. You'll have to make sure whether it's worth it to take that approach. But for some larger bike clubs that do have some charitable activities, some educational youth outreach that they do want to underwrite with tax deductible donations, might consider setting up a separate 501c3. I'm going to look real quick and see what we have in terms of questions, if there's anything here. So I do have one question. It says that not-for-profit status is very hard and expensive to do. So if not making a profit anyway, why not do for-profit? I'd say that's beyond the scope of what I actually know and understand. I think that my understanding is that the 501c4, C7 statuses, there's not a filing fee, and that the requirements are not as stringent as with a 501c3, so you can still get exemption from federal taxation as a result of one of these other statuses. They're not as expensive to obtain. In terms of the expense of obtaining a 501c3, my understanding is that the fees for getting it can range from about $4,000 at the high end. Ron in Kansas City is working with someone charging, I think, $500 for the 501c3 filing, but Ron is able to fill out some of the paperwork himself, which reduces the cost. A lot of other people have found pro bono assistance, either in the form of local law schools that have nonprofit divisions and have students that can do this as part of their classwork and experiential learning. So, there are options there. With the 501c3, I understand the average time can be about 6 months to obtain it. High end of what I have heard, what Ron has relayed to me, can be more like 2 years. It can also be done more quickly. Someone else asked what tax status I recommend. I think that will probably vary a great deal from organization to organization, how your activities are conducted, how your activities are couched. The 501c3 can be very favorable if it's worth the expense to obtain and if your activities warrant it just in terms of receiving donations. But a lot of organizations are not running on donations, they're running on membership fees. So then it might not be worth it. So unfortunately, I'm not in a position to provide an answer of what's going to work for everybody, because I don't think that there is anything that is going to work for everybody. What I'm going to do, I do have another question which I is, I think, is going to be beyond my scope to answer, but perhaps if Ron joins us by the end of the presentation, he may be able to help out because he knows, especially the tax issues, much more deeply than I do. I am now going to turn things over for the remainder of the presentation up to the discussion phase to Paul Rubin. He's with the Memphis Hightailers Bicycling Club. I am going to give him control of the screen. We should see his screen soon. Paul is president of the Memphis Hightailers Bicycling Club, and he has been with the Memphis Hightailers during a time when they've revitalized a club that was fairly stagnant, and he's going to talk over some of how they did that and how they made the decisions and how they directed and turned the club around. And at the end, I hope there will be a lot of discussion, and I hope that a lot of the participants here will have things to offer on the topics of just sort of the foundations of what it takes to run a club. Paul, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, Scott. Thank you very much. Let me give you a little agenda of what we're going to cover here tonight. And the whole thing is really driven, our membership has gone from 325 to over 825 in the past 2 years, which is phenomenal. And the question is, why has this happened? How did it happen? And what lessons can we learn that maybe you might be able to apply to your clubs to achieve something like this? I think there's a number of reasons. Some we were lucky, some we were good, but I'll go through and explain how we got there. Going to do a little background of the club and a little background of myself in the club and how I got involved in it, and how I got on the board and became the president, what challenges I found and the board found with where the club was at, and what steps we took to try and get us where we are today. And where are we today? So this is kind of what I'm going to be covering here in the next few minutes. The club was founded back in 1962 by some guys that were friends and rode bikes and said, let's have a club. And it was really a social club back then. And I think that's probably back before the league was founded, but I'm not sure about that, Scott, but this was when the originators started their bike club. In the 80s and 90s, there were a number of interests in the club, and there were people doing touring. They'd get together and go off on long tours, or they had off-road riders, or they had racing. So there's a lot of different interests which are different than the interests that we found in the club here in 2010, 2011. The success over the years depended a lot on the president. He or she, if she were a strong leader, the club would be doing a lot of stuff. And then when that president moved on, the replacement may or may not be as talented, energetic, available, and sometimes the club's interest or success would waver until the next president came on board. So it's kind of a little bit of a roller coaster over the years with the club going on. So the president was a key person. The club, as we got into the late 2000 years, basically had a number of local rides where you meet on Saturday morning at the Super-Low or at the outlet mall and be a ride of 25 miles or 35 miles, whatever. Or there could be club rides, which would be event rides that would happen during the year or non-payment rides, but open to members, and the time earlier open to anybody. And it might be a burn the turkey ride around Thanksgiving, or it might be a St. Paddy's Day ride on St. Paddy's Day, or at least on the weekend around St. Paddy's Day. And we had 3 event rides where you paid to do the ride, and the money on 2 of the rides would go to charity, and one of the rides would be our club fundraiser. So just a little background about myself. I've been a member since 1989, but just kind of a member, and I had other interests. I was a runner. I did triathlons. I did marathons. I swam a little bit so I could at least do the triathlons. From a work perspective, I was a consultant, had laptop travel. So I helped manufacturing companies implement software to run the business. So there are times where I'd be busy on the road, and there are times where I'd be home with weeks of time to play and do different things. I had never been involved or hadn't been involved in the club leadership, and I had done 2 centuries. So I was maybe more a typical hightailer, going out and riding socially, but not really involved with the club. So how did this all come to be? In 2008, the president quit midterm, and I didn't really know the details, but for whatever reason, he got frustrated with what was going on and just quit. And there was no president-elect essentially nobody stepped forward, and the club kind of, I don't say stopped functioning. They're still the local rides. Some people still put on the big fall fundraiser, but basically nothing was going on. Nothing else was happening. The past president from 2007 called a meeting asking for volunteers of the club, saying, hey, we need to get something together. This club's going to die. Could you please meet at this local business, and we provide some beer and some soft drinks and some snacks, and let's come. So I decided, okay, I'm interested in the club. I'll go and listen, and maybe I could contribute something. And the past president's name was Barry, and Barry sees me in the meeting and says, Paul, do you want to become president? I mean, like, here I am just trying to help out a little bit. And I said, no, Barry, I do not want to become president. Thank you very much. I'm here because I'm willing to help, maybe work on a committee, but no, I certainly don't have time to be president. Well, time went on, and Barry calls me up in May and says, hey, would you like to be our webmaster? And I said, Barry, I work with computers, but I'm not a techie. I'm an applications guy. And he said, you don't need to worry about building websites. We use Club Express. And I'm sure that's a subject for another webinar, but we've been very happy with Club Express supporting our club from the website, from membership, from communications, newsletters, etc. And so Barry basically said, well, all you have to do is read the manual, and they have a very good help desk to help you. And I had a selfish reason perhaps helping, because I had organized a fundraising ride in Memphis for a local conservancy, and trying to get it published and managed on the website. Their webmaster was very unfriendly, rigid, didn't want to do anything. And so basically anything I could do was going to be an improvement over what the previous webmaster was doing. So I took over, made a few changes, and I'm happy to contribute to the club. Well, then Barry says, we need to have a meeting and talk about officers for next year. And it was one of those meetings where, well, all the people want to be president, who wants to do it, and everybody stepped back, and I'm standing there by myself. So you guessed it, I became the president-elect. And I said, I'm not going to be president. We need a position called president-elect, and I need you on the board to help me because I travel the moment I'm not working, but I could have another project come on. So the board agreed to work with me, and I became the president-elect, meaning I become the president in 2010. So what were some of the challenges that I found as president of the club? And basically, what kind of club do you want to be? What was our purpose? What are we trying to achieve? So we can have some kind of direction for how we structure and go forward. I remember being asked by a buddy of mine, I'm riding, and said, do you remember the Hightailer? And he said, no. And I go, why? And he said, why should I? What's the benefit or value of being a Hightailer? And that kind of stuck with me as I was getting into being an officer, saying we need to have a reason to be a Hightailer. What's the value for a Hightailer? I asked our treasurer, what's our financial situation? Well, our treasurer was a very nice guy. He was an accountant, and he could give me some stuff coming out of QuickBooks, which really didn't tell me a whole lot. And so I really didn't know, did we make any money last year? Did we lose any money? Did we make any money on our rides? And really didn't have very much available in terms of report to tell me that. Who can we get to fill the board positions? As we'll get to in a moment, we created a few new board positions, and the question was, how do you get folks to volunteer, willingly or unwillingly, to participate? And will my work allow me, if I start traveling, to lead successfully? So that was something, could I really make this work? I didn't want to come in and be a president and not be able to do the job. So those are some challenges that I faced and the club faced. So what were some of the steps we took? Well, one, and sometimes it's good to be lucky, during the summer prior to the October election, in my transition to becoming president-elect, there was a gal, one of our leaders, one of our club rides, called me up and said, hey, Paul, there's a guy who used to be a bike rider who's joined the club and is riding, and he has a background in IT, and he does webmaster stuff for his daughter's soccer team. He might make a good webmaster. So I called him up, and by golly, the gentleman was very much interested, and so now I had someone who really was a webmaster, could do 10 times better than I could do, and suddenly I had a very strong person on my board. And this was critical because our web was a major tool of communicating to people. And we made major changes in making it a place for people to go and look up and find information. So that was something that we're lucky, but we also got ourselves a very talented webmaster. I then pulled on some stuff that I knew from my business experience that we need to have kind of a business plan. We need a meeting to figure out what do we want to do next year. So I had the board meet at a conference room at one of the local supermarkets, gave us a conference room in the back to meet. And on Saturday afternoon in October, on a gorgeous day, 10 of us met and talked about what are we going to do next year. and I kind of led it with flip charts and stickies and pads and saying, what do we want to do? And we basically started planning what we're going to do for the next year. And there are certain things that came out of that that were good ideas, but, you know, guys, there's only so much that we can do in 1 year. Let's build, and some of those things we may have to wait for a second year. A key thing we did was looked at our bylaws and said, all right, what are we doing, and how do the bylaws support where we want to go? So one of the key things about the bylaws that we did not change were what were the purposes of our club. And that was to promote the use of bicycles for sport, recreation, and transportation for all skill levels of bicycle riders. And this pointed out that the majority of activities were intermediate to advanced riders. We did very little for beginner riders. So that was definitely an opportunity for us. Develop and promote the use of safe and competent riding techniques. Well, we had one LCI instructor in the club, but we weren't doing very many training classes. So that was another opportunity that we could do. To improve the recognition by the public and public officials of the need for safer cycling conditions. Well, we had a couple people on the board that were very interested in advocacy, and we were indeed working with the local, state, and federal organizations to try and improve cycling and getting bike lanes and funding, etc. So that's something we were doing. And to cooperate with public authorities and observance of all traffic laws, etc. It was a matter of helping our riders when they're out there and out the red lights and let them know, you know, what are the proper rules for our cyclists. One thing we did here, just to back up, is with our bylaws, we kept the basic purposes, but we looked at all the offices, and we looked at the titles and what we were doing, and we basically revised our offices. We didn't have a president-elect. We added that position. We had a vice president of racing. We created a director of rides. We had a treasurer and a secretary. We had a vice president of off-road, which we hadn't filled in years. We created a director of membership. We had a director of racing. We didn't do any racing. We had a director of programs. We had a director of marketing. We created the position director of advocacy, and so forth. So we basically made sure we had the positions in place to support the type of club we were. And one of the things that, just coming back to the bylaws, that we said that wasn't written is we were a group of cyclists out to have fun. We were a recreational group, and so we could have said to have fun and enjoy biking and being together, but that was just kind of an unwritten premise of what we did. So some of the steps taken, after we revised the bylaws, for about that time, we sent out a membership survey, and we asked our members, what is it you like about the club? Do you participate? Do you do this? Will you want to volunteer? And there are a number of activities, information we got back from our membership, and we had over a 33% return rate, which is incredible for a survey. And part of this was we offered a $100 gift certificate from a drawing if you entered the survey. So you might say we paid for our survey, but it was well worth $100. We got a lot of information back from the club that helped us understand where we were, what we were doing right, and some things we weren't doing right. So I strongly urge you, if you're not doing surveys, to incorporate that in at least annually, if not on a more regular basis. Another key thing was, this is a plug for Scott and Andy Clark, is that there was a seminar offered in January of 2010 in Boca Raton, a League of American Bike Club Leadership Seminar, a workshop. And this was the first one, I believe, that had been put on. And I went down there, sent by the club, and I had a chance to meet representatives from about 15 or 16 different clubs. There was more folks from the Florida area because it was closer, but there were folks from Kansas City, the Twin Cities, the D.C. area. So I got a chance to meet other officers and hear how their clubs were operating. And these sessions were well worth it, and that was really something that helped me and take information back to my club to help get us where we are today. And we had another seminar we'd heard about that was out in San Jose by a different organization. And so I sent one of our board members out to that seminar to see what he could learn. And he came back all energized, and one of the things that was really kind of, he picked up from there was sponsorships. And he then, as we'll see later, went out and got sponsors for the club, brought in money and activities, things we never had before. So sending out your board and getting them trained can get them very motivated and, you know, educated to help your club. And the last thing I did is I need to understand where we were going with the budget into actual. So I developed an Excel spreadsheet. I started sorting out the wheat from the chaff to understand what were our expenses related to our administration, what were the expenses that were tied to a club ride that really should be separated, how did we do on our event rides, and I was able to understand where we were making money and where we were losing money, and ask some questions on why are we being charged so much by Club Express, why is our insurance so high, and just understanding some stuff and finding out there were things, what we were doing, what we weren't doing. So that was very helpful for me to understand our cash flow. More steps that were taken. We eliminated non-member access to the newsletter. Basically, if you want to be a member of the club, we have benefits. Why should you have all the information, all the articles, all the timely stuff if you're not a member? Not a member. And for goodness sakes, our membership dues at the time was $20 for the year. I mean, it's not a financial heartbreak to become a member of the club. Now, we did, in looking at our financials, we decided to raise the dues, and we raised it to $25 for the year. So we made it $25 a year for members and $40 for family members. That was individual. So we basically said, you want the newsletter, be a member. We promoted the insurance benefit. That was something I learned from the seminar in Boca Raton when there was a presentation by the American Specialty. Their insurance is used by, I don't know, 75 or 80% of the bike clubs in America, or at least associated with the league. We were using a different insurance company, have been using it for many years. And one of the things that was brought out of the seminar is you want to promote your insurance. Let people know if you're a member on a member ride, a club ride, you're covered by our insurance. And when I mentioned to our insurance company about that, they said, you can't promote that. I said, why not? Because then people might file a claim. And I'm going, well, have we ever filed a claim in our 7 years with you? No, because nobody knew about this. And he says, well, if you're going to promote the benefit, we may have to drop you as a customer. I said, can you drop me now? Give me a rebate on my year's membership and insurance, and I'll move on? He said, no. I said, fine. Then when it comes up in October, we're leaving you, and we're going to promote the membership benefit. And we did. To let people know you're covered by the liability and the secondary accident insurance by being a member. We published bike shop discounts. If you bring your membership card into the local bike shop, you get 10 to 15% off of your parts, and some shops off the labor. So that easily pays for your membership for just a couple purchases. We got some new sponsors, and one of the sponsors that our gentleman that went to the seminar in San Jose brought back is New Belgian Brewing, who sponsors sports bike clubs around the country, and they basically offered to provide beer at our 3 big rides that we had. So we now had a beer sponsor, and we enjoy biking and enjoy having beer after our big events. So that was very helpful. And by the way, they gave us money in order to serve the beer at our rides, so that was even better. And our guy that came back from the seminar said, we can do a better job of making our start and finish of our rides better, and basically put up scaffolding, got banners made. So when you come to the ride, it's fancy. You ride through this, archway. You finish with the archway. So that was a very exciting way to generate buzz with our rides, the big rides. Other factors that helped us, I'd like to say a rising tide or a rising river, but that's probably not appropriate in Memphis today since we just crest a near record high on the river. But interest has been rising in biking over the last several years. And so more people interested in biking, more people get bikes. The political climate in Memphis changed about a year ago. We had a mayor who'd been on board in power for 16 years who finally was encouraged to leave or voted out. And the new mayor is supportive of biking. He has a pledge to have 55 miles of bike lanes during his tenure. Now this compares with the previous mayor. The engineer of the city refused to acknowledge biking. He refused to put down bike lanes and thought bikers belonged on sidewalks or somewhere else. So we have a new mayor, and he basically said to the engineer, you're going to follow and get federal support for what we can do, striping lanes, or you're out of here. So we've got a whole turnaround in the political administration of biking in the city. And our very first Rails to Trails opened on the Green Line, which we had a 7-mile strip of road that was a former railbed converted to a bike path. For some of you, you say, well, what's one Green Line, 7 miles? Well, that's 7 more miles than we ever had before. And so that was very exciting. It brought people out, and the biggest problem was the lane is getting overcrowded, and people are saying, how do we share this with all these runners and joggers and bikers? But they're expanding the Green Line to other areas of the city, so that's really exciting to our riders. So if people are interested in riding, they're interested, we get them involved in the club. Some of the challenges you find as a president is an unexpected resignation of a board member. I mentioned we had an LCI member on our club who also did a fantastic job with the newsletter. And 3 weeks into my tenure as the president-elect, he resigned saying, I'm burned out on biking, I'm quitting my newsletter job, I'm quitting all my training, and don't call me, I'll call you if I ever feel interested in doing it again. So boom, we suddenly had a opening for a newsletter editor, and let's just say the newsletter editor, we got a replacement, but the quality slipped for at least a year before we got a new person on board who can make that. So sometimes folks leave, can be, if you haven't got all the organization in place to replace them, which we don't as a small club, we have to struggle. You also may find that things are not getting done by a board member. We had a first membership director who basically was a very nice guy, but didn't do much in terms of membership. Didn't put out membership reports, didn't send letters out to new members, didn't follow up when people resigned. So I basically encouraged him to, when his term retired, to say goodbye and get someone else to do it. So it's sometimes tough as a, the leader of the club to tell people thank you very much, but we need someone else to help us. And the third thing is our big fundraiser is our Red, White, and Blue ride on around July 3rd. And for those you put on rides, people sometimes wait for the last minute. If the weather's nice, they come. If the weather's bad, they don't come. So that could have a serious impact on the amount of funds we might have during the year. Fortunately, the last couple of years, particularly the first year I was president-elect, we had great weather. We had record turnout. We made $7,000 contributions to our bottom line that we hadn't planned on. So we were in very good shape after that fundraiser. So sometimes you can get lucky. Lessons learned. Energetic leadership. Having someone there to be energetic, who's got vision, is great, but also sometimes help to have some leadership skills. The former president he comes to me with ideas. He's got all sorts of wonderful things we should be doing. He tracks websites around the country of other bike clubs, but if you had him lead a meeting, things never got done. He just that wasn't his skill set. So one thing I did bring to the club was the ability to run a meeting, follow an agenda, take notes, and to get people feel that their time was well spent in the meetings. Recruitment of board members. How do you do this? You need to be out there talking to people. Ideally, you have people in committees, and you have people who can step right in. I learned several times when people left or quit or changed jobs that I had to go out and recruit someone. And the matter of asking folks who know on the board, who do you think might be a good board member? And meeting them for lunch and buying them a drink and seeing if they might be interested in trying to sell them on being on the board. And so I found a couple people that way, but I probably had to meet and interview half a dozen before I found one or two good ones who wanted to join the club, board that is. And once you get them on the board, you need to care and feed them. One of the things we do, we have our board meetings about once a month, and they're not always the same day of the week or the month because sometimes I'm traveling and I try and schedule it as best I can around my travels to be there. But we provide dinner, we provide free beer, drinks, and one of the key things that I know I need to continue to do even better is to thank the members for their efforts, recognize them, put them in the newsletter, thank them publicly for the work they're doing. So you got to keep the folks happy because there's not a whole lot in terms of their pensions they're going to get from being a member of the board. You got to try new things. One of the things that came out of a strategic planning meeting is we had a young new officer who said, have you thought about putting your club on Facebook? And I hate to say it, 2 years ago, like, what's Facebook? I've heard of it, but I never used it. Oh, yeah, we got a whole younger crowd that uses it. So we said, fine, why don't you set up our club on Facebook, and why don't you manage that? And so we use that to reach out to a number of our board members. So you got to be willing to try new things. Except you can't do everything. You might say, hey, I really want to do this. I want to send letters out to expired members. I want to personally call and thank new members. Sometimes you just can't do it. You just don't have the resources, and you move on and do the things you can do. But you got to focus on the basics. You got to know, what's our basic purpose? We got to put on a couple good rides. You got to make sure people come. We got the SAG supported. We have the roads marked, and people feel that it was a good day for them. Do we have are we focusing on, at least financially, are we understanding what we're charging, and are we properly paying our bills, and are we in good shape? So you got to at least keep certain basic things going in order to keep the club running. And you got to understand your finances. And through last year, as I mentioned, our very successful fundraising bike ride plus the sponsorship money, we basically increased our total cash flow $10,000 during the year. So I felt much stronger about what we could do going forward than where I was when I took over with us not really knowing what we had. At the time we had 10,000, we now have 20,000 in the bank. So summary, we had fantastic club growth, some of which we encouraged by promoting what a hightailer was and giving people a reason to join. Others we rode the rising interest in biking. We had some very good board members who did some good stuff to get folks in the club running well. In fact, I got a new board member now who's off creating a site, a merchandise site. He's getting branded club hats and socks and jerseys that we're going to sell. He's off doing posters for a ride, and he's really doing a lot of stuff that's generating some really good press out there in the public because he's really taken on himself to do that. Make sure you're doing the right things. Make sure you try and take care of your membership and keeping your rides going right, and don't try to do too much. That's one thing I keep trying to caution some club members. Great ideas. Let's do the things we can and grow it. Maybe in 2 years or next year we can do some of that. Let's build the organization. So we've had a lot of fun. It's been challenging. And now I guess, are there any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I think that was a really good presentation. One of the things that I was struck by as you went through that is the idea of focus, the importance of focus, and really deciding who you are. Being a bike club can mean a lot of different things, and forming an identity, seems certainly in your case to have helped you get along, know what you're about, attract the people who are interested in what you're about, and not spend time trying to court people who aren't necessarily interested in the same things. I don't know if there's a whole lot more to be said about it than that, but that was just one thing I would highlight from the presentation. And I have a couple of questions before we get to some of the attendee questions. I guess one of them is, in all of this, is there anything that, looking back, you feel like you worried about too much, that wasn't anywhere near as big a deal as you made it out to be, that maybe you wish you had worried less about at the time?
Well, you might call me a fiscal conservative. Some people might call me cheap. But I treated the club money as if it was my own, and tried to make sure that we didn't spend it unnecessarily. And if I had known in hindsight we were going to have such a good year financially, I might not have penny pinched in a few areas that I penny pinched on. But back when I first started, I really didn't know how we were doing, and so I tried to put in some controls to do things. Now, just one note, being a club, we don't always have all the procedures in place, and we had some members turning in expenses from stuff 6 months after the fact, after we've long since thought we made or lost money on some event. So we recently had a policy, if you don't turn in your thing within 30 days, don't expect to get paid. But basically, if I knew now that we were going to have such a good year, I wouldn't have spent as much time worrying about money.
And so, on the other hand, is there anything that blindsided you as an issue that you wish you'd go back and whisper in your ear at the beginning of your time with the club to pay a little more attention to before it got out of hand? People. I mean, that's really your challenge, your personnel. You got good board members and they're doing the right stuff, you're in great shape. And you've got some board members that aren't doing their thing, things fall through the cracks and aren't getting done, and then you have to go in and try and rescue it. So, yeah, I got blindsided by at least one board member at one point basically chasing away riders because they thought this is the way the club should be run, and basically they were a different out of town, they were on the board, and they tried to impose their will, and people just stopped coming to some of the rides. And so we had to go in and kind of, hey, we understand what it was like when you were at XYZ club, you got a good idea, but that's not what we're doing here. So, chill out, don't scare people off. So it just, people, good and bad, can always be a challenge trying to run the club. And if you were to suddenly find yourself living somewhere new, there wasn't a bike club established, and you wanted to establish a bike club from the ground up, where would you start?
Well, first, find some interested people who want to help you. I mean, presumably you're out riding, you meet other people, find out you got several people who want to do it. If you don't have a core of people to do the work, then there's no sense going any further. But assuming you find half a dozen people, then I say, hey, let's have a meeting, let's have some beer, let's talk about, do we want to be a bike club? What do we want to do? And at that point, you've got to find other people to help you. If you are, great. Go ahead and proceed.
I had, I guess, a couple of thoughts. One directly related to that. Someone I was talking to just yesterday was talking about how much cycling activity goes on Meetup.com. So I think any organization might want to look into listing some of their rides on Meetup as a way of bringing in people that are listing bicycling as an interest and are looking for other people to cycle with. That's one easy way to reach out to new people. And another comment I had on, I think, one of your last slides, Paul, you were talking about energetic board members. One thing that I've learned in working different sorts of organizations is that there's some people who just don't want to be board members that will do terrific work for you and have a job that they're very happy to do, but just won't be pushed into doing anything else. And you can sometimes squander their energies if you push them too hard. I guess on the other, it takes some sense to figure out who those people are, because a lot of people will drag their heels about being a board member and need to be pushed into roles, or else you would have no one doing them. But I guess you've got to be careful to understand that that's not necessarily for everyone. Someone asked, what was the website again? It's meetup.com, meetup.com. People list activities they'd like to find, things for others to do with them. Jim Hannon, you have had your hand up for a long time. Have you got a question or a comment for us? You're on.
No, I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button.
Okay. All right. Somebody else, if you've got a question or comment, I would love to hear from other club leaders those kind of questions that I was putting to Paul. Things you worried too much about, things that you didn't worry enough about, and really where you would start if you were starting from the ground up again, because I know that there's certainly people here who are starting from the ground up. One question that someone typed to us on the question interface, Paul, what do you think was the biggest draw, of the ones that you listed for new members? Do you have a sense of what really was the number one thing that helped you grow?
Well, one of the things we did with members is we started promoting our ride and had some big event rides. We made a larger gap between a member price and a non-member. So, for example, the ride might be $25 for a member and $35 for a non-member. And so we want to encourage you, if you're a member, if you do 2 rides plus this, you're going to get your money back. So we tried to encourage them on our big rides. That's where we saw some spike in membership. So people sign up for the ride, I'll become a member, and now I can get the cheaper rate. So that was a key thing we did. And I think the other thing was we work with the bike shops to encourage people who buy new bikes to become a member. And for a while last year, we had a half-price membership deal. You buy a bike, you can get a membership for half price. And that generated 50 or 60 new members last year. So those are kind of 2 key things that I know that definitely helped with our membership.
Awesome. Well, Griff Bowdy, I'm going to put you on the spot. I know the Bluegrass Cycle Club has been growing a lot. Do you have any sense of what the biggest draw for new members of the Bluegrass Cycle Club has been? You there, Griff?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm just shocked you put me on the spot. I was sitting there listening, having my phone on speaker. I'm like, uh-oh, he just called me out. But can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What do you think has been the biggest draw?
I would go back to say what the president-elect from the Memphis Hightailer, we had energetic, all of our board members are energetic. We always do ideas. And one board member recently told me that even when we disagree, like I'm considered a really passionate bicycle club leader in my organization, and we always have our differences, but he made a good point and told me, well, if we weren't growing so much, well, in the last 5 years we went to 200, and now we went to about 200 to over 600 counting right now. And if we didn't disagree, then that just shows that no one's caring as much. So we are care, and we're always doing more rides, and we're always thinking up new events. And one thing our members really love is at least one social event ride a month, and then we focus on our 2 big fundraisers, which is our Horsey 100 Memorial Weekend, and then our Red River Rally in the mountains of eastern Kentucky in October.
Okay, great. Well, stay on alert. Never know when I might call your name again. Thanks, Griff.
You're welcome.
It sounds like similarly there that having a focus is helpful. Jay Merowitz, you've had your hand up. Tell us where you're from and what do you have to add to the discussion?
What I'd like to talk about is your comment before about how hard it is to get people to lead things even though they want to contribute. We did our first event ride 2 years ago, and we had several committee chairs to fill, and we couldn't do it. And we made a decision, let's just get people, ask people if they want to be on the committee. And we literally just threw them in a room, told them what the committee needed to do and figure out. And eventually somebody rises from the ashes and shows leadership. And I remember one incident was kind of funny. The person who really started leading the group came up to me and said, by the way, who's the head of this committee? And I told him to look in the mirror. So it's a way to get people to do things, and one of the problems is they don't know what the job is, but once they start seeing what it is and understand it, then they're more likely to move up and help you do whatever you need doing.
All right. Thank you. And what club are you with?
Morris Area Freewheelers.
Great. Thanks, Jay.
In New Jersey.
Thank you. Okay, Paul, a couple of other questions here. One question is, what do you charge or get in kind from your sponsors?
Okay. Basically, one option is with the New Belgium Brewery, they pay us money to sell beer, or basically give beer away to event rides, and we pay the cost. So that was one. The Memphis Grizzlies is one of our sponsors, and they give us $500, and we help publicize them at the rides on banners and on our website. And we had a third sponsor that basically we publicize them, and they help promote or give us the location for one of our event rides and didn't charge us anything. So we have a few sponsors, but we'd love to have more activity to go out and get more funding and stuff, but we were just lucky. One individual, he went out and got us a bunch one year, and then this year he's busy with a new job and is not going out and getting sponsors. So we're kind of dependent on a one-person band.
Got it. So another question we have, I think harking back to your bylaws and your purpose, is should the promotion of health and fitness be an explicit goal? And what I imagine that to be is helping to establish the nonprofit and educational nature of an organization. I think that's probably why it appears in a lot of bylaws, would be my guess. That's part of what makes a bicycle club a public, somebody that's contributing to the public welfare. Do you have any thoughts on that, Paul?
Well, interesting, those 4 purposes of the club are the ones that were written back in 1994. We didn't change that. Now, the concept of do we really want to promote fitness and all that and promote commuting and all that? You could. And I think it's really a question when you're doing your bylaws is what is our purpose of the club? What are we trying to do? So we don't explicitly say we're trying to help with fitness, so that's a good purpose. We try to promote safe riding and people get out and have fun. So just by implication, if you're out riding, you are hopefully getting fit. But that could be a key thing. So if I was doing the bylaws from scratch, that might be a good one to include. Our board last year said, hey, this kind of gets people riding. We'll just leave that alone. We have enough to work on to get people to become club members and learn how to ride. So.
Great. Next question. Who elects your board members? Is it the members or does the board do the electing?
I could say yes to that in the consultant's answer. What basically happens is we do have an election. So at some point, the bylaw says that we need to send out to the board, to the membership, and have them vote on the officers. Well, in the last 2 years, the only vote has been, folks, here's your board. Please, quote, vote and show them your sign of approval. There's nobody running for office. We have not had anyone. We've not had conflicts with people who want to be an officer. We basically had to go out and recruit people to become officers. We put them on the board, and on the board nominating slate, and we basically say, here's your office for next year, please vote on it. So we don't really have that issue of I mean, it's basically a rubber stamp by the membership.
I've seen that in plenty of organizations. It can often be, I haven't seen very many contested elections in many years of working with small local organizations. Does anybody else have any questions or comments, observations? I'd love to get other people's experiences in establishing getting their clubs going and the epiphanies that they had along the way. You can raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment out loud. You can type in a question. if all right, Jim Hannon, do you have a question or comment now?
Yeah, I had a comment, something that we just recently did that you might be interested in. Based on our survey, we wanted to attract new riders. And, so we discovered that the majority of people that completed the survey, the number one reason they had for not riding was safety. So we did our best to put together a safety program, and one of the things we did is we established ride leaders, and the ratio was about 10 to 1. In other words, for every 10 members, we had one ride leader. I had a prior experience with CPR first aid through the fire department, and one of the things that we just finished about 2 weeks ago is that I sat down with the fire department, paramedics, and we created a program designed for cyclists. And what that was is that we went through the normal CPR course. However, there were some unique items that we also addressed that we might experience on the road. Also, we went through a first aid, and we created a third module that was a rider down situation where we have simulated a bike-to-bike, bike-to-car, and a solo bike accident. And we had 18 people that went through this course, all of which ended up to graduate and with certifications. And we just finished this about 3 weeks ago, but we got some great publicity in the South Bay where I live as a result of it, and we feel that it's going to attract a lot more people that probably would not have become a cyclist otherwise. So it's kind of a different aspect of training that I'm personally USA a level 1 cycling coach, and so we kind of focus in on performance and don't always focus in on if the worst might happen. And we feel, you know, we're more prepared if the worst did happen, and hopefully it never will. But I think the people that ride with us appreciate that attitude. That's the end of my comment. I just wanted to share that.
How big is your club?
We have 215 members, but the club itself is less than 5 years old. So we basically have been doubling our membership every year.
That's great. And what qualities make a good ride leader in your program?
You know, we have once a month we have a meeting, and we get together and talk about what a good ride leader is. And out of that, we have kind of written an outline of what we think that is. And it's amazing. I mean, some people gravitate towards mechanical. In other words, you know, want to inspect everybody's bike. Other people gravitate towards understanding the laws. In California, so sometimes the laws can be a little bit confusing to cyclists. In fact, it's probably that way across the nation. So we try to leverage those the talent that we already have, and I think in sharing experiences with each other. I mean, we always have somebody doing sweep with each group, and you know, how do we handle that? If historically, if one person had a flat tire, we would all stop, and now the group has gotten so big that we can't stop on the side of the road. So how do we handle that? We are constantly going through these situations and trying to refine our processes, and it's all about safety, though. That's the number one ingredient. The second is fitness, and the third is having some fun, and we try to balance that out pretty carefully.
Great. Well, I really appreciate that. I did recently add to the Club Leadership Resources page that I was showing at the beginning of the presentation a link to a document and a lot of associated material for the ride leader training that the Twin Cities Bicycle Club, Twin Cities Bicycling Club, does. So you can find that at the Club Leadership Resources. And Jim, if you have anything that you could share, any documents, or if you have web resources for ride leaders and the ride leader training, and I can share that with other clubs who are thinking about that kind of program, let me know. And I've gotten someone else, people here saying thank you very much for that comment and want to be put in touch with you. So I will be making at least one connection with you tomorrow, Jim, if you don't mind, someone who wants to find out more about the training. Okay.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
That would be fine. I would be glad to share whatever I have.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And let's see. Mark Mumby, are you with us? Tell us where you're from.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm Mark Mumby. I'm with a club called Bike DFW in Dallas, Texas. And I just had a quick question for Paul about recruiting board members. We can recruit board members. A lot of people say they'll do it, but then they end up not doing anything once they're on the board. And I don't know if Paul actually tries to get a commitment from board members before they go on the board, or how he works trying to identify people who are really going to be actively involved in the organization.
Excellent question. There's no magic wand. You find someone energetic, you're interested, you talk to them, you try and say, are they successful in business, are they successful in other organizations, and if they have a track record and they're interested in doing something for you, great, come on board, and they're generally pretty good. On the other hand, someone might say, hey, you talk to them, you want to help out and be blah, 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 and they say, sure, here's what's involved, that's great, but they may not really have the true commitment. And then it's a challenge on how do you nudge them to do something, and if they don't do them, what do you do next? So when you're dying to have a board position filled, sometimes you just take the first person that comes along. I've had both success with some folks that we've gotten to do super, others I've had to replace. So I don't have a magic wand on that other than trying to find someone that you might know from other experiences successful in some other realm, other organization before you get them on the board.
Yeah, so if there's somebody who's not working out, you actually ask them to leave or to go off the board.
Well, yes. I had a case on one individual. I mentioned a membership director wasn't doing anything. Well, we were growing in spite of it, so it wasn't like a critical thing that I had to replace. Basically, when his term came to an end, I said, don't you have other things you want to do, or whatever it was. We came to a mutual agreement that he'd had his fill of the board. Not fill of it, we wanted to get off the board. I had another case where I had a replacement to our newsletter editor, and the individual said, I'll help out on a temporary basis. I'm out of work, but I'll do this temporarily. Well, the individual did the best she could, and there was a point in time where she was having some issues, and we have a weekly newsletter that goes out. Then a couple weeks, things didn't go out, and things weren't happening. So in that case, I had to step in and basically find a replacement and basically, I can say, replace her immediately, because we couldn't afford not to have the newsletter go out on a regular basis, since that was an important means of communicating. So I guess it really depends on what happens. I've also had board members. I had one that just a few weeks ago basically quit, saying, "Hey, I'm an officer. I need to quit. I'm too busy with my job. I can work a little to help you, but I need to get off the job." And so I had to go out and find someone to take their place. So sometimes you're forced to find a new officer. Other times you know you need to replace the person with someone that can do a better job. I wish I had a magical thing. I wish I had a club with lots of committees and lots of people, volunteers, stepping up to the committees that are ready to take over on the board. But we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think few of us are. Thanks for your thoughts.
How many board members do you have, Paul?
We've got about 12 positions, 2 of which are directors at large. And one is for a guy who basically has been in the club for many years, and he likes to help out with our big events and run the SAGs. So that's his job, and he just does that. We have another one, the guy that was our sponsors guy, we've kind of left him as a director of called sponsors indirectly, and he does what he can. So we try and get more people on the board because the more folks you got, you can spread the work around. But the amount of work gets done really depends on who's in the position and how fired up and energetic they are.
So yeah, one question was just what is the appropriate number of board members? I know, so we've got on the club resources page now the bylaws of the Memphis Hightailers, so you can see those job descriptions that are there. James, who asked the question, get a sense of what the roles are, and that's 12 board members for, you said 850 plus? Is that where you are now, Paul? Is that what I remember from?
I haven't checked this evening, but we were 835 2 days ago.
835 members, 12 board members. A small organization would probably require fewer, and I think there's probably also, some clubs might divvy up the work a little differently between board members and then non-board volunteers. So I've got a question here. Well, a question has been posed by Stephen Powell asking if successful clubs can rely exclusively on email and web-based communications, or is it important to put a paper copy of the newsletter or a ride schedule into the hands of members? How do you handle that, Paul?
All right. We used to have a very good paper newsletter, and I don't know, about 10 years ago they decided the cost for mailing it out, so they stopped doing it. This is where a PDF you can get away without having the cost of postage and the cost of a hard copy. The key thing we found was communicating with members on other means, such as Facebook. Some people was a way they want to get their information about the club. Others we get through email. Others go to our website and we have information there. I think the paper world is, I'd say, a dinosaur, both from cost and environmental reasons. You provide the information in a PDF, and people can download it and print out a hard copy if they want. So we basically are doing very, very little with paper, other than we may have not a paper, but a poster at the bike shops to join the club, or a poster advertising a ride, or a club schedule we can hand out to people at some of our rides saying, here's a list of our schedules. But that's about all we do in terms of paper right now.
And I also think that Griff with the Bluegrass Cycle Club, I'm not calling on him right now because I'm not sure he's there. He might want to raise his hand. I think I heard that Bluegrass, another growing organization, as we heard, went paperless recently, are not mailing out a paper newsletter but have an e-newsletter and are managing in that fashion. I have a question. Somebody's interested about who's actually on the call. We've got 27 attendees in addition to myself and Paul. I'm going to put together a quick poll so people can tell us how big the organizations are. In the meantime, I see Jay Merowitz's hand up again. Did you have a question or comment, Jay?
A comment. Getting members for our board or for new committees or almost anything that you're going to do. One of the things we do, and I agree with Paul, there is no magic bullet. There's no single way you can do it. But some of the things we do are we keep track of how many rides everybody leads, and one of the things we do is we look through that list, and the ones that are they don't have to be at the very top, but the ones that are just contributing significantly, they're people that we look at, and then you start. That's like the first screen, and now you start looking at other things that they do, what their skills are, and what the job that needs to be done. This helps get closer. Are you batting 100% when you do this? No, but it has helped in several cases. That's. And it doesn't have to be just ride leads either. I mean, it can be other things. People that tend to help out a lot at parties or picnics or whatever, they just have a tendency to get involved. This is how you pick your people, because they jump right in. I remember a long time ago reading a book about promotions in general, and one of the interesting questions that was posed by the author was, has the person asked to be promoted? And in a sense, by doing what they're doing, contributing, they are asking to be more involved. So this may help you staff your board of directors.
All right, thank you very much. Any thoughts on that, Paul?
No, I think it's an excellent thing. We do not do enough to. We have ride leaders, but we do not enough to promote and support him as we should. And that's, again, there's lots of things your club can do, and you got to decide where can you put your resources, and that's something. That's a great way to identify, interested volunteers.
Great. I'm just trying to get this poll ready to be launched. I thought I'd done it once and I didn't hit quite enough buttons, but everyone is going to, with any luck, shortly see on their screen. Sorry. Doesn't like special characters. Caps lock is on. I hope everybody will forgive me. And somebody's asking if there's a list of member clubs, contacts, and URLs on the website. If you look on our website under resources, there's something called Find It, which will allow you to find member clubs by geographical range. And click through to find contact information in a state, in a city, within range of a zip code. And the poll has just come up, so attendees can vote. If you are trying to organize something with groups in your area, I can also provide you a contact list within a geographic range. I probably won't send out the whole list unless you can convince me there's a very good reason for it, but I'm happy to put clubs in touch with each other. We also have a new Google group, which is linked from several places in the Club Corner section of the website, where I'm connecting club leaders together. But if you use the Find It tool, that is one way to find clubs in your area, either to connect club to club or for other reasons. And Jay, I see your hand up again. Did you have another comment, or is that still up from before?
Probably before. I didn't.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, no problem.
Yep. Okay, just checking real quick to see who's on the call, and we get a sense of where we are. Otherwise, I think we've pretty much covered it. I'll let you know before we sign off who's here on the call. Again, check our website, the Club Corner, the club resources there, the sample documents. If you have something to share, I would appreciate you sharing it with me. Also, linked from pages there on the Club Corner of the website, there's a link to a survey about the club leadership trainings, the online and the in-person. Just trying to get a sense, for instance, whether we should continue doing these over the summer or whether you're going to be out riding on weeknights, and would prefer that we wait and resume these in the fall. Either way, it's fine with us. We just want to know what you want. You'll also get a link to that in the thank you email that comes once we have finished this session tonight. I think you'll get it sometime tomorrow. Seems like most of the people on the call, I'm going to close. 81% of you have voted. Doesn't seem like there's much action on there. Anybody want to vote before I close this out? Okay, and now I am going to share the results, and you see there the sizes of the clubs on the call. This is out of 27 people that are on the call, and 81% voted. That's too much math for me at this point in the evening. But we see at least half the call is in the 101 to 250 range for club size. So again, please take the survey that you can find in the resource or under Members Club Corner. There's a survey about club leadership training. There's lots of resources there. There are links to join the new Google group. I would love to see a lot of this discussion going on all the time amongst club leaders, helping figure out items of shared vexation. Paul, thank you very much for sharing the evening with us. Thank you to all the attendees for sharing their time. Appreciate everything that everyone has had to offer tonight. Thank you very much, Paul, and everyone.